Hi everyone, welcome to today's wellness session. Today I'm going to be talking about personal boundaries and how to set healthy boundaries. Personal boundaries can range from rigid to more loose or relaxed, and healthy boundaries fall somewhere in between. Some examples of rigid boundaries or an individual that has more rigid boundaries might come off as hard to get to know because they have very few close relationships. They'll be a lot more private and not disclose as much information about themselves and would be less likely to ask for help. An individual with more loose or relaxed boundaries in general may overshare information about themselves, so give you a little bit too much information. They fear rejection or overvalue other people's opinions. They also experience difficulty saying no. We did a whole session on saying no, so if you haven't seen that, please go back to our Wellness Tips with Lori playlist and view that session. An individual that generally demonstrates healthy boundaries usually is able to disclose information about themselves at an appropriate amount depending on where they are and who they're with, just according to the situation. And this individual also makes decisions based on what's best for them, not necessarily what's just based on what's best for everyone else. An individual with healthy boundaries is also able to say no and accept no for an answer without getting offended. You may have different types of boundaries depending on the situation or group of people that you're with. So, for instance, you might have more rigid boundaries at work or school, whereas with your friends, you may have more healthy boundaries, and with your family, you may have those loose or relaxed boundaries. So, personal boundaries are rules or the guidelines that we set for ourselves within our relationships. Now let's talk about how to set healthy boundaries. So the first step is to define the desired boundary. And to do this, you'll have to engage in some self-reflection so that you're able to recognize different situations and settings in which you feel more comfortable, or sometimes when you've experienced some discomfort, so you can become aware of where you need to adjust your boundaries. And once that you have defined your desired boundary, then it's time to move to the next step, which is to communicate your boundary. So you'll need to communicate your desired boundary with relevant people or groups. Your boundaries may be different depending on the group or the situation that you're around or in. So for an example, if you have a friend that's just always blowing up your phone while you're at work, you may have to just to communicate with them, look, please don't contact me during work hours unless it's an emergency. Or you may want to say, I'll contact you when I'm available. In the communication step, the best thing to do is just be straightforward, just short and sweet and to the point. No need to over-explain yourself or why that's your desired boundary. But the next step involves consequences. So you may want to think about, what you're going to do if someone continuously violates your boundaries, even though you have clearly defined them or communicated them to the individual or person or even groups of people that are violating them and causing you any emotional distress. This could look like it may get to a point where you even just avoid being around that person, or you terminate the friendship, or something like that. You just, whenever you're setting your boundaries, you may want to think about, what the consequences are if someone does violate that boundary that you've set for yourself. The last thing you want to consider when setting healthy boundaries is just starting small. So start with focusing on one area of your life, or with one relationship or one group of people. So you might want to start with, one friend, and assess your relationships, your boundaries within that relationship. Or you might want to start with your boundaries at work. But just start small, and once you've successfully set and communicated a healthy boundary, then you can move on to another area. So setting and maintaining healthy boundaries can improve your overall health. I hope you'll try some of these steps we talked about today. Thank you for joining today's session, and I hope you'll stay tuned for our upcoming sessions.